Good evening and thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. New revelations about Chicago police working with federal immigration agents. The Justice Department fires immigration court judges in Chicago and around the country. And City Council approves a new ethics reform package as the city's watchdog announces she isn't seeking reappointment. We're covering all that and much more tonight, and we've got a great panel to help us do it. They are journalist Brandon Pope, the Chicago Sun-Times' Violet Miller, Jim Daly from Southside Weekly, and the Chicago Tribune's Adie Quigg. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. So, Jim, Southside Weekly obtained calls from that federal immigration facility. It was the site of protests last month. Immigrants reportedly told to appear for sort of a routine check-in and then were detained. Chicago police were on the scene, which raised questions about whether their participation violated Chicago's welcoming city ordinance. Here's a bit of that audio.
Chicago emergency room.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, my name is and I am calling from a program that is contracted through ICE, and we are seeing people here for visits, but I have a crowd of protesters that are on private property. So I don't know if the police would be able to come to help us with that.
So, Jim, it sounds like from these calls that at the very least dispatch was pretty aware that this was, Homeland Security requesting assistance.
That's correct. So that dispatcher obviously knew that they were calling from ICE. I also obtained another call that came into the department's CPIC center the CPIC center called OEMC, where the CPIC captain said that they were Homeland Security investigations, which is a division of ICE. And he said that they didn't want to put that out over the air because they didn't want to make it a media thing, and that they wanted to keep it quiet, basically, but that officers were requesting assistance and that he didn't care what they were doing, but when they're requesting assistance in that manner, that they have to respond.
Yeah, so do we know whether the message sort of got through to Chicago police themselves about who was requesting this help?
As far as responding officers on the ground, we don't yet know that whether they knew that it was an ICE facility. CPD has maintained that the responding officers were not aware that it was an ICE facility, both in press statements and also in a hearing for City Council earlier this month. It's unclear. We do know that the department brass absolutely knew that it was Homeland Security and an ICE operation, though.
Do we have any sense of what happens next here? I mean, obviously, a lot of alderpeople are still quite upset about this.
They are. So Andre Vasquez and the Committee on Immigrant and Refugee Rights passed an ordinance to the full council that would compel CPD to turn over all records related to that. At this week's City Council meeting, it was deferred and published, which means it's pushed to the next meeting. And in the meantime, the Immigration Rights Committee is meeting next week. We'll see if they have anything else to do about this. But the investigation's ongoing, and it's still a sort of an open question whether the police violated the Welcoming Cities Ordinance or the state's Trust Act, which similarly prohibits police from helping ICE.
Yeah, and if so, what happens after that?
Exactly, yeah, like will anyone be held accountable?
Right. Well, the City Council also making a move this week, approving a new ethics reform measure aimed at stopping the law department from interfering in investigations that risk sort of embarrassment or political consequences for city leaders. Adie Quigg, this took a long time to negotiate. What was the conflict?
It was really surprisingly heated between our IG, Deborah Witzberg, and Corporation Counsel Mary Richardson Lowry. I had never seen a Corporation Counsel kind of publicly blast an IG like this, but eventually they did come to a compromise. Subpoena stuff was left out. Witzberg's major concern was that the mayor's office, Corporation Counsel, was defending the city and basically hiding materials and interviews that were really important to IG investigations. So they landed on a compromise, and shortly after, Deborah Witzberg announced that she wasn't going to ask for another term.
That's right. I mean, and she's been, often at odds with Mayor Brandon Johnson. Do you think, how might that influence his and sort of the committee that he has to work with when they're choosing a successor here?
I mean, it's an IG's job to make people mad, in a sense. I think, hopefully, the mayor chooses a strong IG, because the IG doesn't just go after the mayor's office. They go after waste, fraud, and abuse. The last quarterly report that came out, for example, had a bunch of city employees basically like doing personal stuff on city time.
And that's bad, right?
And that's bad. We don't want that. They save money. they go after the people who are doing bad stuff. It's not always the mayor's office, so hopefully the mayor makes a tough pick.
All right, well, sticking with City Council, after a debate that has dragged on for weeks and weeks and weeks, a City Council vote to override the mayor's veto of a so-called snap curfew ordinance failed. Here's a bit of what Mayor Johnson had to say about that.
The easy thing to do would be to play into the political theater of safety. The easy thing to do would be to tell people that if we threaten young people and families with severe repercussions, that somehow would make us safer. But we know from years of doing the same old tired forms of policy that it doesn't get the results that people have longed for. It doesn't keep us safe, and it doesn't make our city stronger.
So, Brandon Pope, does it feel like this measure, this idea has finally been put to bed?
I'm sure it's going to come up again, even though we haven't had one of these, teen takeovers, teen trends since March. It's still an issue at the top of many's mind. We see it happening in the suburbs and throughout many other cities as well. But what you see here from Mayor Brandon Johnson is kind of striking that same drumbeat he's been doing in terms of his campaign promises, listening to the kids. You had a lot of youth activists and the student groups like Good Kids Mad City who came out strongly against these snap curfews, and he's listening.
Yeah, and you know, sort of the point that we need to put these alternative strategies into place. We need to create safe places for people to gather.
He also made the point that, you know, numbers are down in terms of, you know, violence within the city. So he used that to bolster his case as well. And whether snap curfews actually work, the data is still really spotty on that as well. And so sure, it would breed a lot of legal challenges too once you put it in effect, ACLU and the like. I'm sure he's thinking about that too.
Well, there was another proposal in City Council this week that would have allowed things like coach houses, granny flats, basement units all around the city, building on a pilot program. Two alderpeople used a procedural move to delay the vote, which they love to do. But Violet Miller, why are people so keen to see this housing measure pass?
I mean, you know, the city needs affordable housing, and so we're looking at, you know, what avenues do we have for that? We know that, you know, one of Brandon Johnson's moves has been to create a city department that would start creating affordable housing, but now we also have this measure coming through that, you know, it's been debated. I think it's been 60, 70 years since granny flats have been allowed in the city, and I know a lot of the debate has centered around whether this could speed up gentrification. We could possibly see developers picking up, you know, housing or these new granny flats, they're called, and kind of flipping them in a way that would be more harmful than helpful in trying to get this affordable housing to people.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the question is, you can build these houses, but can people afford to live in them?
Well, a lot of it was also aldermanic prerogative. It was a lot of aldermen saying, I don't want any more density in my ward made up of single family houses than is needed. Yeah. And there are a lot of aldermen who said, please let me opt out, which is the exact aldermanic prerogative that previous administrations have gone after.
Kind of the whole thing.
Kind of the whole thing. Not here.
Well, AD, sticking with you, Mayor Johnson's been on sort of a listening tour doing these budget roundtables ahead of a very difficult, we expect, budget season. What's the picture that's emerging there?
The word that kept coming up was grim, very grim. The mayor has referenced multiple times a deficit of more than $1 billion. There was also a recent pension bill that went through that's going to cost a lot, not in this next year, but tons and tons. I think $7 billion down the line. We have expensive police settlements. We have expensive overtime at Chicago Police Department, and not a lot of options given that alderman last year said no to a property tax hike. But the mayor's options are very limited. Springfield doesn't want to give him money. He doesn't want to cut folks from city employment either. So no great options. No one is looking forward to this budget.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not new revenue and there's not cuts.
There's also zero desire for a property tax increase.
Right.
Especially close to an election. And that also complicates matters because, like you're saying, there's not many options here. What can you possibly do? Maybe congestion pricing for like New York did? Maybe that's an idea, but right now it seems limited.
And the grocery tax has been hotly debated too since Pritzker cut it from his budget, so it doesn't look like there's any path forward there either.
Which would add another $80 million to the deficit.
Exactly.
So
just FYI.
Just FYI.
Yeah, no, nobody would be happy about a grocery tax, but you know, the state takes it away and municipalities rely on it.
And the city is kind of out of a lot of the short-term fixes that it's done, especially debt refinancing. There's not much you can do. Little cuts here and there just aren't going to do it. So something drastic is going to happen for them to fill this gap.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've heard the phrase scoop and toss, but they can't.
Don't even go
there.
there.
They can't
Nick.
do that anymore.
Don't even go there.
And this is where this is a moment where a mayor like Brandon Johnson really has to put on that charm, put on that offensive, and say, hey, I got to work with people that usually disagree with me, because he's got it kind of on both sides here. You got folks that are not going to approve any tax increases. You got folks who are not going to approve new revenue ideas. He's got to find those compromises where he can and work with the Brendan Rileys and work with the Lopez's and stuff like that to try to find some sort of compromise here, because it is dire.
Well, and this is not a council that will all hold hands and jump into the deep end together, which makes it so much harder.
It's so contentious.
So contentious, and I haven't gotten the sense that aldermen feel like they are all being brought into the
fold.
Into the fold.
And that's been the theme so far in Brandon Johnson's whole term so far.
Right, and I think he would like to avoid a repeat of a very contentious budget season last year.
Right.
Well, Jim, we heard this week from the Park District that it had completed its investigation into that incident at Douglas Park. Lifeguard shot 2 teens. He didn't have any formal complaints, though patrons and colleagues had raised concerns about his behavior. Do we know what happens next from here?
Well, he's been arrested, right, and he's being charged, I think, with murder.
Yes, first degree.
It's a good question what's happening at the Park District. This is not the first time that there's been a problem with lifeguard oversight. There was a huge scandal a few years ago. The guy in question also had a very violent encounter where I think he shot someone's dog. So it's a real open question why he was hired to be a lifeguard around kids, and why he was able to have a gun in Park District property. I mean, there's a lot of open questions here, and I think that they will need to take a hard look at the lifeguard program.
Yeah, they said he passed a background check, but certainly that does not capture everything.
Right.
Well, Violet, we heard this week that 2 more Chicago medical providers are pulling back on gender-affirming care. What's the latest there?
Yeah, so earlier this week, Rush University Medical Center announced that they are ending their gender-affirming care program for new patients. So patients who are already there can remain, but they will not be taking on new patients, and they'll be referring others outside of Rush University. This comes after UI Health was sued in February, the first of these, and they ended up capitulating to the suit, and eventually Northwestern and Lurie's, who saw protests over this as well. And then just today, a few hours ago, UChicago also joined them in that they are completely ending gender-affirming care for minors. I wasn't able to get much details in terms of what services were previously provided or will be cut. But this is all coming the same week that the federal government is cutting the trans youth suicide hotline, 988. Illinois has been able to continue funding that, so at the state level, 988 is still available and can be called if needed. But outside the state, there's also Trans Lifeline, the Trevor Project, for anybody who might need it this week in light of the news.
Yeah, I mean, what have we heard from these? You mentioned it's hard to get details. Does it seem pretty clear that, Rush, UChicago are making these decisions based on the fact that, the Trump administration is hostile to this kind of health care?
Well, that's really the mystery right now, actually. So the executive order they all cite came out January 28th. So we are months and months away. We're half a year now away from that. And so why Rush and UChicago decided to this week is a little bit of a question. Neither would answer if they had been contacted by feds this week, but the Department of Justice did send out a number of subpoenas to hospitals, doctors, and lawyers across the country, kind of in this vein of just continuing to try and cut this care from being available.
Yeah, you have to imagine it's still something that is in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. Well, also in D.C. this week, Congress approved the president's efforts to claw back some $9 billion in funding that it previously approved, including foreign aid and funding for public media. Here's a bit of what Senator Dick Durbin had to say earlier today.
They've got to think about a plan B, how they're going to continue to provide credible news source in Illinois and around the nation, and do it with the new political and economic reality. Secondly, all of us, myself included, my family, have to do more. If we believe in public broadcasting, we have to support it.
And we should note that this public media funding, it's most critical for stations in small towns, particularly rural areas, stations that provide emergency alerts. Nearly half of the stations getting money are in rural areas. Brandon, do you think there could be political blowback for Congress people who voted to defund stations their constituents may rely on, or will folks maybe not draw such a straight line?
That's a great question. In this climate, I doubt it. And then that's really sad, honestly. When you think about what public media has done, I am a product of public media. I grew up watching PBS NewsHour with my grandma. I got to work at PBS stations growing up and get my first opportunity in TV. Like, it's so much bigger than just one organization or a story you don't like. And the other part of this is these stations have been shown to be some of the most nonpartisan, straight down the middle you can find. It's a real loss for so many communities, but I do not think the political headwinds are going to really come swirling for anybody because of it.
Well, thank you. We'll have you on for the next question.
And on the opposite end of that, I mean, we even saw Trump threatening, rather, to not endorse or pull endorsements from some of those who were, threatening to go against him, or those who had previously voted to pass this funding. And so it was a very weird mix of folks who voted alongside Democrats. You had Collins and Murkowski, the kind of usual crowd, and then also Mitch McConnell. So obviously, he has enough political power on his own there. But, as you said, this is for rural stations. I mean, we're coming off these floods in Texas where in some of these areas, public broadcasting might be the only alert system or the only way to hear this news that they might have. And so, as with the Medicaid cuts, we're seeing rural hospitals suffer. Right here, we're going to see the same thing.
And none of this is happening in a vacuum. Like, local news is suffering everywhere. So any damage to like one portion of it just adds to compounding losses in local media.
Well, and the other thing to point out too is that, about $8 billion of the rescissions, that's for a variety of foreign aid programs. I mean, how badly could that hurt sort of the United States image abroad? I
mean, it's already been hurt by the early cuts that the Trump administration has made. But again, he doesn't care. Those people don't vote.
Well, the Trump administration also recently fired 17 immigration court judges, including several here in Chicago. Here's a bit of Judge Jennifer Payton on our program last night.
A greater concern is what I see as the intentional destruction and weakening of the immigration courts. By removing all these judges without cause, and at the same time increasing the number of cases, the people that are going to lose are going to be the respondents, because they won't have the due process and the justice that they all deserve by being present in this country.
I mean, Jim, to Judge Payton's point about, due process, it sounds like the folks who have been fired, or even some who have left, there's some concern that the DOJ, which does have authority to fire immigration judges, they may be trying to put their thumb on the scale here. Is that a fair read?
I think it's a fair read. So these are not judges the way that the public generally thinks of them, as robes on a bench and part of the judiciary. They're special inquiry officers within the DOJ, but they are integral to the due process part of immigration proceedings. You're absolutely right that the administration has shown little interest in due process for immigration arrests, and further weakening the system that would support that certainly seems to, whether it's intentional or not, will have that effect.
Well, Violet, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul joined yet another lawsuit against the Trump administration this week over some funding that was frozen. What does this one entail?
So we're looking at, in total, $6.8 billion, but in Illinois alone, closer to 242. So that is after-school programs. This is English learning language programs, summer programs, a lot of things, that, specifically these summer programs and after-school programs that have been shown to reduce crime and other things. So I think we'll definitely be feeling it in some parts of the country if this isn't able to be won back. But I think what's notable about this case is Attorney General Raoul has joined a number of cases alongside attorney generals. It's been largely the same coalition of about 19 attorneys general across the country, but this one was 24 as well as DC. And so we're seeing this coalition kind of broaden beyond just these Democratic attorney generals, possibly growing up to about half the nation now. And so it'll be interesting to see how some of these legalities play out.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if some of that is this issue about judges no longer being able to issue a nationwide injunction that folks say, okay, maybe we could let somebody else carry the ball on this one, but people are starting to see that if this is something that they want to see reversed, they have to be an active participant in the case.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear that they see strength in numbers, and that's why, I mean, these legal documents are lots and lots of pages. It's a lot of reading that I've been doing. But I think it's notable here, too, that in addition to the attorneys general, we also had 16 Democratic governors. We had 100 Democrats in the House who have also penned letters half begging, half slamming Trump for trying to push these cuts through, and also, again, begging for those funds back because they are so sorely needed. Something that's really important right now is that a lot of these schools in Illinois specifically found out June 30th they would not be receiving this funding, and a quarter of that is usually dispersed around July 1st so they can get prepped for the school year. A lot of schools start at different times in the year, and so we may see a less prepared education system nationwide at the start of the school year.
Well, Brandon, Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza announced she's not running for a third term right before Cook County Democratic Party slating. She's widely considered to be eyeing another bid for mayor. Do you think that's going to be the next move here?
I think it's very likely. She hasn't really been shy about it, actually. I mean, if you log on to X/Twitter, she's in the headlines. She's criticizing Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson at every turn, as if she's already ready for a primary against him. So I'm pretty sure that's going to happen.
Well, Adi, you've been covering the slating yesterday and today, where Assessor Fritz Kagi ran into a little bit of blowback. What happened there?
Right, he did not get the endorsement of the Cook County Democratic Party despite being the incumbent Democrat in the office. Patrick Hines, who is the township assessor for Lyons, who previously worked for Fritz, for Joe Barrios before him, he was in the assessor's office for a very long time, did win over committeeman. I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be an open primary. There was so much division within the party. End of the day, they did a bunch of votes, came down, but the vibe I got was it was overwhelmingly anyone but Kagi.
Interesting. And there was also some pushback to Board of Review candidate Samantha Steele. What happened there?
Another incumbent who did not get slated. They actually redid slating. They were going to make it an open primary as of yesterday. Got back today, said, no, we are going to endorse someone. They endorsed Liz Nicholson. Sam Steele has had a variety of ethical issues. She's also fighting a DUI from back in November that made national news. Democrats also, kind of the vibe was anyone but Sam.
And of course, we did not see an endorsement in the hotly contested Senate race. Were you surprised by that at all?
Yes and no. I mean, the loyalties are very strong. A lot of people couldn't be swayed to support someone else like they could for assessor. But it's interesting that Governor Pritzker could not elbow in his preferred candidate, Juliana Stratton.
Yeah, I mean, was that a surprise to you at all to see, given I mean, it's three pretty strong candidates, but to have one with the backing of the sitting governor, who is a major funder of the Democrats around the state.
For that reason, I was frankly surprised that more people are even running for the seat. I mean, the governor has a lot of clout and a lot of money, and
so does Raja.
Yeah, oh, that's true. Raja, yeah, he has a lot of money too.
Yeah, and Robin Kelly has many, many years of connections in the party. But you sort of thought it was that Pritzker might tip the scales there.
I mean, I'm naive about politics a lot of the time, but I was still surprised. Yeah,
I think that's what Pritzker wanted. I mean, he wanted it to be a coronation. That's when he hops in. That's what he expects. Yeah. I think Raja Krishnamurthy and Robin Kelly hoping that's not the case.
The governor was not there these last couple days. I'm not sure if that made a big difference.
Yeah, yeah, we saw his lieutenant governor candidate speaking on his behalf.
Which was a very spicy kind of back and forth. I was surprised.
Well, we had a very spicy back and forth on this panel tonight, but that's all the time that we've got. So our thanks to Brandon Pope, Violet Miller, Adi Quigg, and Jim Daly. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family. The Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by tonight's presentation of Week in Review is made possible in part by Ann and Rich Carr, BNSF Railway, and Francine and Dr. Anthony Brown.
Before we go, we want to take a moment to recognize 3 people who have been vital to this show and many others at WTTW. Tim Jackson, Jim Mancini, and Dave Moyer are retiring today after each has put in decades of service to bring you quality programming. Tim has been one of our top editors, cutting stories big and small for our news programs, as well as his work on all sorts of WTTW productions. Jim is our audio wizard and has worked nightly on Chicago Tonight for many years, as well as so many other shows, from music extravaganzas to candidate forums and everything in between. Dave, in addition to being a fine camera operator himself, has run our field shop, keeping our field production team ready and our camera and audio equipment organized and in tip-top shape. Tim, Jim, Dave, thank you so much for everything you've done for all of us at WTTW and, more importantly, for our viewers. Enjoy your next chapters. They are very well deserved. And that's our show for this Friday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay informed. Have a great weekend. All right, we found out just before we went on the air, NASCAR will not be returning next year. Thoughts, feelings, happy, sad?
I mean, I'm not surprised by it. I do think they're going to come back. I'm in the minority. I like NASCAR in Chicago. I thought it was fun. Vroom, vroom.
First year was especially fun with all the terrible rain and the crashes. But I don't like NASCAR, so I was like, oh, yeah, action.
Yeah, I'm an affordability sports person, which is why I go to Sox games.
Oh,
yeah. $30,
Very cheap,
you're in the front row.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't want to see anybody win. I get that. I get
you know
that.
what? See, that's the thing, is I go and see the Sox.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that contributes to public safety policy and guidelines.